example, if the uni is saying that, oh, we feel that black talent doesn't feel included, okay, let's go all the way to recruitment and onboarding. What schools are you targeting? Are you targeting inner city schools that are private, or are you actually going out of your way to find schools in East London, South London, the poorest parts of London, and then you're complaining? Fine. Let's say you've been able to recruit them. What about the interview process? Are they being interviewed by a panel of white men? Or are you being intentional about making sure that the interview panel makes them feel included by having people that at least look like them?
So, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're looking after yourselves. Welcome to another episode of The Student Guide, where we bring on amazing guests to discuss amazing topics and most importantly, to learn about cool new things and resources that could support you in your journey, whether it's personal or professional development or your well-being as a whole. As always, we bring on amazing guest speakers, and as you can see from the numbers, we're actually coming towards the end of this season. So yeah, we can't believe it ourselves. I think this might be episode 9, so we might be one more episode before the end. But yeah, if I've just made that up, and actually not, well, then, we're coming to the end of the season regardless. But yeah, we've got an amazing guest speaker for you today. I could read out their description that they've given us that's on the website. I could tell you a bit about them myself, but I think it'd be best to hear from them first. So Tolu, I'm going to pass over to you. Thanks again for being on the podcast. Could we know a bit more about you and what you do?
So, hello everyone, my name is Tolu Afelumo. I'm the founder of Tolu Wellspring, which is a consultancy which deals with wellbeing and inclusion. So we run companies through strategy, review, development, and implementation. So it's not just the consulting side, but we also implement the gaps that we find. For example, if you don't have, wellness action plans, then obviously we're mental health first aiders. We can help you do your wellness action plan and training and all the rest of it. But on the other side of what I do, I have a lot to do with mental health and inclusion of everyone, really. So sometimes I do work for students, sometimes I do work for particular groups of people. Like I recently just did an intro to mental health for Africans course, and that was really nice. Had lots of people from Botswana, Nigeria, like kind of just, willing to learn. And that's kind of where I am right now in terms of what else I do. I'm starting my master's in mental health in September. I'm also a qualified counsellor, so I do a bit of that. And yeah, so that's me.
so basically what you're saying is you're doing many things, and we should keep an eye on the space, because there's always something new coming through. That's good to hear. Yeah. That's good to hear. We're going to get started with the first official question, which is all about Tolu Wellspring. Now, we'd love to know for this first question, what inspired you to start Tolu Wellspring? And then sort of like a two-parter, how did your background in medical environments and corporate experience influence the decision to sort of start Tolu Wellspring?
Cool. Okay, so I'll do the first part. So why did I set up Tolu Wellspring? Because I'm the type of person who I feel like I can do anything in the world. Nothing can stop me. And this is a huge issue, and I feel like I can solve it. And I feel like Tolu Wellspring is the best avenue for me to do that. I always tell people that I almost went down the political route, but I figured that, I wouldn't be able to make enough change compared to if I was in control of my own business. And then in terms of my background, so corporate experience, I've been at places like TFL, Finance, RSM UK, Teneo. I always liked corporate. I always ended up going back to corporate. I'm a medical student, I'm studying, I'm still going back to corporate. That's kind of just how I've been. And corporate is kind of what made me realize that this was a huge issue, well-being and also inclusion. So, and corporate is also where I got kind of my first exposure to like doing DEI in like a corporate environment. But my medical background, or study, should I say, and placement, it's taught me so much that I can apply to the business that I have now. For example, cultural competency, mental health, mental capacity assessment, and things like that. Also, treating people with dignity is a big part of what we do. So I'm able to translate that into tangible results, but also actionable steps for those in corporate, because I've been in corporate, so I know what corporate's like. But then I've also been in the hospital and I know what the hospital is like. So I have a lot of experience working in different environments. And I feel like that plays to my benefit because I can identify with the struggles of different groups of people. Barring my professional background, I do think that my shock was kind of why I started Tolu Wellspring. I always say I came back from a place of kind of Black privilege, in the sense that I went to an all-girls school, so I learned that women can do anything. And then I went to Brampton Manor Sixth Form, which is like one of the highest achieving sixth forms in the country, but it's also a place where white people are the minority. So again, I'm learning that your race doesn't mean anything, because we're literally competing with Eton. Black people are going to Oxford, white people are going to Oxford. None of that was in my mind until I entered the workplace, and I was like, oh, why am I the only girl? Why am I the only Black person? Hold on, what's going on here? I was so confused. And it was a really stressful time for me. And it was quite overwhelming. And I realized that actually there's so much work to be done. And then that's kind of what kickstarted my research, my development, and kind of set me on this path. And the goal eventually is that nobody will get to the workplace and not feel included or have an issue with their well-being. And if they are, they'll be the minority, not the majority like it is now. So that's kind of what I'm working towards.
That's incredible. And honestly, well, I didn't say this at the start, but I was a guest on Tolu's podcast.
Oh yeah.
So now it's interesting to be on the other side of things, because I didn't know some of the stuff that you just mentioned, so it was really great to hear. But honestly, I get the political, like almost going down the political route. One of the people that helped support Pick Up the Mic when he started, and still to this day does, my friend Samuel. The two of us were talking about that. We both were like, before knowing each other, we're thinking, he studied politics at uni. I was thinking, myself, I was thinking maybe I would go down like a politics route, and I'd be like advocating change. But yeah, I was like, I think it was just when I was in my like late teens, like maybe 17 or 18, that I was just like, actually, you know what? Politics just isn't for me, because I was just you're almost like there's a difference that comes, like you said, like from having and that's the difference between like founding. Even you don't need to be like the founder of your own company, but with a company, there's a bit more control about, like you said, like how you can create these inclusive policies, or you can sort of direct the work that you do and the work that you sort of support. Whereas if you're going down the politics route, sometimes you're sort of like, you can only do what your party is interested in. If you even try to go independent, that's not to say that you can't be elected as an independent candidate, but it's a lot harder because you don't have that support. So I completely and definitely agree that, and I think it's interesting because I think for a lot of young people that, there has been that shift, especially in like recent years. Like even at this, like, it's not like, it's been a while, I say a while, but like we've had a bit of, there's been a change in like UK government. And it was interesting because, like this other podcast, I guess the last thing to say on this was this other podcast I was watching that mentioned something similar, that, as you mentioned here, that they were saying like, this is the first time that they've sort of grown up around they're one of them's a comedian. He was just like, this is the first time I'm going to be doing comedy as under a new government, under a Labour government. For a lot, so even he was saying like for a lot of young people, there might be young people that like most of their life they've been able to actually like influence stuff or like learn about sort of like global issues has been under a Conservative government. So it's going to be interesting to see like how, this isn't to say like I don't know what the future will hold, but it's interesting to be in that space and see like what could be coming next.
I agree with you. I think it's I think it's a big, yeah. I actually forgot about the fact that actually many people would have been under the other government for a really long time, basically all their lives. So it's kind of like a new territory for them. Whereas for some of us, it's like, returning back home.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to go on to the next question, which is all about the swim model. Now, with this, we're not saying, we're taking everyone who's listening or watching out for a swim. This is actually a model that yourself as a business you have developed, which is the Simplified Wellspring Inclusion Model. So we'd love to know a bit more about it. If you could explain to us what it is, how it looks, and then again, this has a bit of a two-parter as well, how it's helped organizations translate their well-being and inclusive strategies into reality.
So the idea of the swim actually came on a bit of a whim. So essentially, when the way I do an audit, you have like a rubric and it's a spreadsheet. I don't want to go too into the details, but essentially there's different items on the spreadsheet, and I'm checking against an organization's strategy if they, scoring that item on their strategy effectively. So all my rubrics covered 4 domains. They covered recruitment and onboarding, work environment and culture, metrics and measurement, and then advocacy and external initiatives. And I started thinking, this is such a complicated process. I mean, there's formula upon formula on the spreadsheet, converting it all to report. It's all very complicated, basically. How do I present this in a way that clients and everyone else can understand? And that's where I came up with, okay, fine, let's put it into a model. So in the model, it's basically, I wish I could get a picture up. It's basically the part of that I'm reviewing, so gender, ethnicity, disability, neurodiversity, you name it. And then it branches out into the 4 different domains. And then I was thinking, okay, well, what can I call it? Because it was very complicated. Now it's simple, so simplified. And then I can't say Simplified Tolu Wellspring because that's too long. So I took the Tolu out and I put Wellspring. And obviously it's about inclusion. So I just said Simplified Wellspring Inclusion. And it's a model, so model. Then I realized that, oh my gosh, that stands for swim. And we're currently in harsh currents right now. We're in troubled waters. Why don't I market it as the swim model? Swim in the sense that you can swim through the harsh currents, you can swim past these harsh waters and territories and actually survive. And that's kind of where the swim, I don't know if you can see it there. So you've got the 4 domains are there to depict kind of how our thought process is and how your thought process should be as a business when it comes to swim. Another thing I use the swim for is also looking at organizations that failed. So when I'm doing the Inclusion Effect podcast, for example, I used it on the Arcadia group, and we were looking at all those 4 domains. I don't know if I can name drop, you can cut that out. And kind of looking at, how did they fail in recruitment and onboarding? Was their team, were their interviewer panels diverse? What are people saying about their interview experience? Sometimes I just go on the website and literally go through the application process for a job and see what it's like for a woman or for someone from a minority ethnic background. And I can kind of score that particular item in the whole domain from there. Currently, I'm working on a white paper for construction. And it's been really handy because I've realized that in construction, they focus a lot on the 4th domain of the model, which is advocacy and external initiatives. So yeah, they're happy to join women in STEM groups and they're happy to do posters, and their website is amazing. I can't fault it. But then when I go into the nitty gritty, are they measuring ethnicity pay gap? Are their interview panels diverse? If they're hiring a woman, are they putting women on the interview panel and things like that? And that's kind of, it just helps me to deal with it strategically. Because when it comes to wellbeing and inclusion, it's very easy to make it sound like wishy-washy hoo-ha, basically, like to make it just sound like it's not important or it's not strategic, but it very much is. And that's kind of, the summary of the sort of simplified Wellspring inclusion model.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think it's really important to see, as you mentioned, like I guess where it came from and its growth, but also its implementation. Because I think, as you mentioned, the biggest thing that people say, like, I guess since 2020, is like there's a lot of these policies or like the work to support like whether it's specifically Black women, Black men, Black people as a whole, whether it's to sort of work on, as you mentioned, like diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole, whether those are programs, policies, whatever. There's been a lot of like reversion on that. So I think it's really interesting to see, I guess, like to see with this model that, as you mentioned, that you're helping organizations like know clearly, like this is actually where, because I feel like it is very easy to sort of like not be aware of the gaps that you're sort of that you've got in your organization.
Yeah, because you know what you're looking for. It's like a uni, for example. If the uni is saying that, we feel that Black talent doesn't feel included, okay, let's go all the way to recruitment and onboarding. What schools are you targeting? Are you targeting inner city schools that are private, or are you actually going out of your way to find schools in East London, South London, the poorest parts of London, and then you're complaining? Fine. Let's say you've been able to recruit them. What about the interview process? Are they being interviewed by a panel of white men? Or are you being intentional about making sure that the interview panel makes them feel included by having people that at least look like them? Like if you're interviewing a young girl, she doesn't want to be interviewed by a panel of men. It's just inappropriate. Like it doesn't make any sense. Just make sure there's a woman or two on the panel. Then next, on the induction day, she's probably going to be the only person that looks like her. So make sure that there's staff there at least that looks like her, things like that. And it's about being very strategic and finding gaps and dealing with them immediately. If you've got interviewers that are Black, then it doesn't cost you anything to switch them out for an interview. I think people think it's very expensive, and it's because, honestly, I think a lot of people in the wellbeing and inclusion game are just in it to make money, are just in it to kind of, get the OBE recognition and build a following on LinkedIn or whatever. So they overcomplicate it, but it's not complicated at all.
100%.
If you look at it from a strategic way, things like the swim, you can swim towards inclusion with no issues.
That's. I think you found your tagline just there.
Question my website.
No. See, we always, there will be. I won't jump the gun, but there will be a point to plug any upcoming stuff that people should be aware of. So we'll save that for a bit later. But thank you very much, and I definitely agree. We're going to start off this next question with a mic check. So for those in our audience, you may know mic check if you're new to the show. Mic check is essentially a fact or figure or story that's relevant to the topic that we're discussing today. And obviously, based on the work that you do, Tolu, we are focusing this on mental health, but also looking at sort of like mental health and well-being, particularly within the sort of like people of color community in the UK. Okay. So according to the Mental Health Foundation, individuals from BAME communities in the UK, also for those who don't know, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in the UK are more likely to be diagnosed with mental health problems and less likely to receive mainstream mental health support. And the reason why we picked this was because, it clearly highlights that there's a need for targeted support and training, whether this is through advocacy, whether this is through support initiatives, whether this is through work similar to what Tolu Wellspring does. So with that in mind, based on your bio, based on our previous conversation of being on your podcast, and from knowing a bit more about you, it's very clear that you're passionate about tackling the stigma that comes with mental health, and particularly within the BAME community, that's the stigma within it. But essentially this question is, what are some of the key challenges you've encountered when it comes to sort of tackling mental health stigma, and how does Tolu Wellspring address these issues?
Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, mental health is important, and that statistic is so important. It reminds me of another one. Black people are 4 to 5 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. They're also more likely not to follow up with their long-term care and things like that. They have 10.5 years lower life expectancy than their white counterparts. Like, it's just all crazy. In terms of like the unique challenges, there's quite a few. So there's internalized stereotypes and biases. So things like anger makes you a serial killer or something like that, something really ridiculous. But you've internalized that, and you feel that if you tell anyone that you're struggling with anger, they're going to think you're a serial killer. So that's one. But then there's also cultural biases, which is like, you're Nigerian.
Yeah, I'm
So
Nigerian.
things like if you've got a mental illness, you're possessed, and so then you don't want to seek help from the people around you because they're going to say you're possessed. So already you've cut yourself off helping yourself because you have this view of yourself. But then also you've cut yourself around getting help from the people around you because there's all these cultural biases. And then there's organizational biases and the institutionalized racism. So when it comes to organizational biases, things like people with sickle cell come to the hospital for painkillers even when they don't need it. Things like that. You're going to feel like, well, if I go to the hospital, they're going to say that I'm only coming because, I'm addicted to codeine or something and I don't actually need it. And then there's institutionalized racism, which means that when someone sees a Black person or a minority ethnic person having a breakdown, they might equate it to being aggressive or trying to hurt people intentionally or committing a crime, which is why Black men are more likely to come to a mental hospital through the police than an ambulance. So there's those are the kind of 4 things I think: internalized stereotypes, cultural biases, organizational biases, and then institutionalized racism. Those are the 4 types of things I think are issues. And the problem with them is that they actually stop you from making any progress because you have a patient who needs help, but their parents don't agree that they're mentally unwell. They don't agree that they're mentally unwell. Society thinks they're a criminal. The hospital thinks that they're making it up. Who's going to help them then? No one. And the cycle just continues and continues. And they just end up in a place that's really bad. And that's why, like suicide, it's like men, for example. Men have internalized stereotypes. I need to be strong. I need to provide. If I don't provide, I'm the worst man on earth. Cultural stereotypes: men are supposed to provide for the women, men are supposed to protect. If you can't protect, he's weak. Organizational stereotypes: if a man starts shouting, he's going to beat me up. Institutionalized sexism, conversely, the other way around, men are violent, men are this, men are that. So there's all this going on. So when a man is struggling, he has so much more to consider. And obviously it ends up in him, unfortunately, taking his own life, which is the statistics that we see. Men actually take their own life more than women because society is more accepting of women showing a vulnerable side to them, showing the emotions that they're going through. Not to say that women don't suffer their own biases. You take someone that has borderline personality disorder, for example, you've got a whole host of issues there when it comes to kind of just stigma. So I feel like when you break stigma down into like the individual factors at play, you can see kind of the challenges that anybody trying to dismantle stigma is facing. I can think back to the mental health training course that we did for Africans. A lot of people messaged me afterwards saying, you know what, thank you, this is so important. It's such a prominent topic. And then someone in particular that I remember, she messaged me saying, thank you so much. I'm so glad that our men are finally dealing with their mental health. And it just goes to show that, like, culturally speaking, it's unheard of for a man who's African to say, I care about mental health, right? Things like that. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but I'm up to the challenge. One thing about me, I do like a challenge. And yeah, like I'm ready for it. Like I'm ready to do what needs to be done. But the biggest challenge for everyone is going to be dealing with it in a culturally sensitive way. Because like research has shown from my own research that the best way to deal with it is culturally sensitive interventions. For example, you can't go to the pub looking for Black people to talk to. That's just not where they're going to be. So it's things like that that make it difficult. Sorry, I've gone on and on there.
No.
Yeah.
No, honestly, that's perfect. I think obviously the situation isn't perfect, but I think like you mentioned, it is really like there's a lot of like useful tools there, and there is a lot of like concern and stigma. I think like it's not like it highlights, I guess, what you're saying, but it's not exactly the exact same thing. Is like, I don't know why, like my sister always jokes that like sometimes Instagram or TikTok just sends you like promotes like the most random of things. So I think because obviously we do a lot of stuff with like videos and YouTubes. The thing that seems to be the most popular now is, I'm not sure if you've like seen some of them, they're like balloon popping like stuff where they do like in-person like dating.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah. That's rubbish.
And it's just like this, and like I think like you said, like it's just very, sometimes it is just like unrealistic, but I know also like sometimes people just are just like that. And literally I think oh no, good.
I said, have you seen the ones in Nigeria?
I haven't seen the Nigerian. I've seen the American ones. Like I just, as an idea, it's like some, and I think some of them are like, some of the people that go on there are generally like, it's authentic.
Yeah.
But yeah, literally like I like what you're saying about like both men and women and like like a well-being point of view.
Yeah.
You know, people like I wouldn't even say it, we'll maybe go back to it at some point, but we had like a dating podcast that we started just to talking about like for young people dating at uni, like what to be aware of. And we were talking about how specifically like linking it to that, this whole idea of like you're putting yourself out there and like with this balloon like popping stuff. So if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, like you can type in like balloon popping dating show and there'll be loads on YouTube.
Yeah.
But essentially it's like either there'll be a group of women or a group of men, and then one person comes in, they'll walk into the room, people can decide. It's basically like, what is...
Smash or pass.
Yeah, there's that, but there was on that show on ITV. No, and I know it's Take Me Out. That's what it's called, Take Me Out.
Yeah.
And it's basically like Take Me Out. So people come in, they can like pop the balloons if they want to or not.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, so the whole thing, the whole reason why I brought that up is because I think people were saying with like Take Me Out, it was even the people like on, like it was very cheesy. The show was cheesy, like, but it was a bit more authentic. Whereas with these shows, it's like very much like people literally before saying a word, people are popping balloons.
It's dumb.
People say like, oh, like I don't know. It was like, and when they're asked it, they're just like, oh yeah, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't know this. And yeah, what's really interesting is like what you said, like for some people, they're just I guess, like from a well-being perspective of like all that, like all these people saying like, oh yeah, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that. Like you said, it does really have an impact.
Yeah, it does.
And even what was interesting, there's this other one, which, it's like a YouTube channel that does like, gets like, they do a lot of like, bringing groups of people together to like either discuss stuff. I think it's either Jubilee or there's another one. I think it might have been Jubilee that do it though. But they did one with like a button. So they bring like two people, like they bring groups of people together and then it starts off with like two people talking. So like if it was the two of us talking, we'd be talking. Yeah. Then they'll randomly like say bits about the person to sort of like encourage the conversation. So they might be like, oh, you know, Jeffrey's got a podcast. Tolu does a lot of stuff promoting like diversity, equity and inclusion. Yeah. And then basically the button lights up. If the button lights up red, either individual is allowed to like press the button to say like, actually, I'm good. I want this person gone and I want someone else to come in. And literally what you were talking about, there was this, there was this woman that was doing it. And basically like guys was just like, she was just beeping them off for like the randomest of things. So she might be like, I don't know, like, I just like they'd ask her like why, and they even got to the point where like even the studio, like the people who managed like behind the scenes, they were just like, is there a reason why you're like saying, like, you're just hitting the button. She was just
Yeah.
like, I'm not really feeling them. Like, this guy said this person said this. And it was funny because the guys basically, like, they showed what the guys were doing, and then the guys were all just speaking to each other, and they were just like, hey man, like, don't worry about it. Like, I don't know what's up with her. And then it was funny because they were just like, look, we're just going to do this. So the next person that went out, they were just like, we're just going to, as soon as it goes red, we're just going to get rid of her, because so you're allowed to
solidarity type thing.
Yeah. So I think that especially, so I guess the whole, with both the bullying stuff and all of that, is like we said, that sometimes, like, the way society, institutions, cultural, like those, not even those expectations, but there's like limitations on like how you're seen, or like what you can and can't do, really does have like an impact on people. And it does, as you mentioned, not necessarily create these safe spaces for people to like express, actually, or this is how I'm feeling, or that's what I'm doing. And I think one final thing to mention on this before we go to the next question is, I think it was really interesting that you mentioned the whole idea of like men and women, because I do think there was this really interesting, I was having like this, randomly having a conversation with someone about this a couple of months ago at an event, and the person just raised this really interesting point, saying that there's definitely like a lot more work, especially for like women of color, to promote that sort of like safe spaces and the facilitation of like, I guess, like, we're all in this together, so to speak. And whether that's organizations that do like support like women of color entrepreneurs, whether it's specifically like black women, like black female entrepreneurs and stuff like that. But he was saying, as black men, there isn't always that. And he was saying, and he was saying, like, personally for him, he wasn't saying like, black men have it better than black. He was just saying, like, as a black man, he found it really interesting, because he was saying like, because I think people just talking about the whole like thing with Jonathan Majors and stuff like that, and like the whole court case that he had, and he was saying like people find it hard, like, he said, like, growing up as a black man, it was hard because you would see like all these people that you saw as father figures, and then you're now hearing like all these stories about them and stuff. So he was saying that sometimes for black men, especially for ones that maybe grew up in like a single parent household, some of like, there's not always that space, or you're not given that same environment to just sort of like feel like comfortable and welcomed and at peace and like a safe space, then I guess women of color. But it was an interesting topic, and like, even like for other people that were just there when we were talking about it, they were just saying, oh yeah, I never really thought about it like that. And I was just like, yeah, that's actually really, really true.
It is true. It is true. That's why, it's such a big deal to me, because like, I feel like inclusion, it doesn't mean including just those who are marginalized. It means including everyone. So when you're thinking about inclusion, you're not just thinking about women. You have to also think about the white men that everybody keeps talking about that are the majority. Like, if you exclude them, just reverse it. You fixed it for one person, but then you've also broken it for someone else. So when you're thinking about inclusion, it needs to be a new solution that includes everyone, not a solution that, that's why I prefer inclusion to equity. Because equity is good, but equity doesn't serve everyone. It only serves those who need it, whereas inclusion serves everyone. That's why I didn't put, I don't put, not that it's not important, but I feel like it's part of inclusion. But the emphasis shouldn't only be on equity, because there's so much that goes into it. It's like a few of the episodes, including yours, that are going to be coming out have been with men and black men. And I think with the ones who are like much older, I have asked them like how the experience has been, because everyone always forgets. There's always people that are going to be left out. Everyone always kind of forgets how it is for them. Like, for them, I'm even editing a podcast right now, and I asked, what are the main challenges that men face in the workplace? That's not a question that gets asked very often. People would rather ask, what are the challenges that women face? And yes, it's right to ask that. Yes, it's important to ask that. But it's also important to ask the challenges that men face. Like, a good example is the Barbie movie. Like, the Barbie movie sums up like like everybody is fragile, not just women, not just men. Everybody has like something that can push them over the edge. And if you take, for example, what happened, I don't know if, sorry if anybody hasn't watched this, but essentially the Barbie movie, it basically follows Barbie and Ken. And in Barbie land, women are kind of in charge and men are kind of like the subservient women of Barbie land. And then Barbie and Ken come to the real life, and Ken realizes that, oh my gosh, it's actually the other way around here. And he basically leads this huge revolution, and he turns all the men in Barbie land kind of against the women to kind of climb up top and be in charge and be in control. And like, they took it really far. They redid Barbie's house and turned it into like a man cave, and like it was really extreme. And then the women kind of revolted and said, well, actually, no, you can't do that. And then Ken basically had like a mini breakdown and he didn't really know what to do with himself. And it goes to show that like they have their own struggles that we don't know about, the same way that we have our own struggles that men don't know about. So it's important to garner that information before you do anything. It's like, it doesn't make sense to me to only deal with one person. If you've got an office with men and women in it, or you're at a school that has girls and boys in it, and then you're offering salon classes, wine and paint, sip and paint, who wants to go to that as a man? Who wants to go to salon, sip and paint? Like, yeah, some men might, but think about those who don't. You need to do inclusive things, and that's why it's always important to get the input of everyone when you're doing anything, because it's important. I could have done the inclusion effect interviewing literally just minority ethnic group women, but that would have been silly, because that's only one, it's only one piece of the puzzle. You need everybody's perspective. And I think in a leadership position, your job is to get the perspective of everyone, put it all together and create a solution that serves everyone, not just some people, not just yourself, not just the white men, but not just the black women. And I think the direction that we're going on is I really don't like it, because we're going to end up with a group of Kens revolting or like kind of just struggling and not like knowing what to do, basically. And that's not what we want. We want everybody to be included. So I really like that you brought that up, because I'm quite passionate about that, as you can tell by my soliloquy. It's like a big deal.
Definitely. I definitely agree. And I think that's why like there are organizations that do, like we said, like they do focus on particularly around like men's mental health. I think it's a month. I don't remember which month, but they do focus on like specifically saying like, hey, look, like, if you're going through something, if you want to speak about it, like come chat, speak to us. We can like get into it a bit later with one of the other questions, but I know even like there was a podcast that I listened to that I can put in the show notes. That essentially like the person there, I've forgotten, they mentioned like 3 things that essentially like help them like when they're having hard times or to feel grounded as an entrepreneur. And they were saying like the 3 things are prayer, it was prayer, friends, and therapy. So they said like prayer helps to remind them that like essentially, it reminds them of their faith. And he was, and they were saying that essentially it's like, I know that if everything was like up to me, if I was the center of like everything going on in my life, like things wouldn't work out. But I know that there's someone else that like, even if I don't have the answers, I don't know how it's going to work out. They do. They said with friends, it's really great because it's almost, you've got like people that they're not just talking to you because they want to get X or they want to collaborate with you on Y or whatever. You've got people that just want to see how you're doing, just want to catch up with you. And he said like, sometimes I'll meet up with friends and like, I'm not talking about business. I'm not talking about like anything like work related. It's literally just catching up. And then, he said finally, like therapy was the thing that helped him, because he said like and that's not to, because I know either before this point or after this point, people will be like, oh, he's talking about therapy and this episode's sponsored by a therapy service. But like, but with that, even like using services, whether it's BetterHelp or like other therapy services available, like he was basically saying that the reason why he finds it beneficial is because he said like, look, like you might not think, like whether you think mentally like you're in the best place that you are, or if you feel like you're not, he said it's always good to just be aware of like the way you think and the way your thought patterns are. Because he was saying you might think actually, you know, I don't know, like you do X and then you never realize that, you know, you've been doing X because of Y, like something that happened in your past. And someone that has like used therapy in the past, like it definitely did make me see things differently, like see even like the way that I think and sort of stuff that you were just like, oh, like everyone goes through this, or everyone thinks like, you know, like if these things happen, then that's what, like, this is why. Like doing therapy just showed me like that wasn't the case. So I definitely agree with that person. And like I mentioned, I'll include the episode link down below. But yeah, they literally were just like, those are the three things that, whether it's to be grounded, whether it's to sort of support their mental health and well-being, those three things help a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you. Therapy is so important. Obviously, I'm not saying it because I'm a counsellor myself, but because it is important. And like one of the things that we do look at is unconscious process. That is like the things that you do that you don't know why you're doing them, but you think that you're in control of them when you're actually not. So, you know, I don't know, like if you take a baby, every time a door slams, they jump because they're scared. That's an unconscious process. They're not saying, that door just slammed, let me jump. It's completely unconscious. If you ask them, why did they jump when the door slams? They can't tell you. They're far away from the door. The door's not going to hit them. But they've associated classical conditioning and things like that. They've associated the sound of a door slamming with the sound of something scary. And it's things like that. So I completely agree with you. I think more men need therapy, especially in the society that we're in. But I also appreciate that there's the whole implication of if I go to therapy, what are they going to think of me? I know someone that started counselling at their uni, and then their uni told them they have to redo the year. I mean, are you kidding? Like, is that a joke or something? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it's things like that.
No, 100%. And like you mentioned, like there are the ways, because I know like an organization came to my workplace and did like mental health. Was it mental health? No, sorry, it was neurodiversity training. Neurodiversity training.
Yeah.
And literally similar to what you were mentioning, they were saying like whether it is to do with mental health or neurodiversity, that because they were just like, oh, why would someone like not be okay with saying stuff or like talking about stuff? And it's literally like what you mentioned, because, you know, if someone says, oh, you know, FYI, they might suffer from like depression, or they you know, they might have this or that, then sometimes people will be like, oh, actually, either like see them as very fragile, so they'll be like, oh, I can't treat them the same way, or I can't, you know, give them X work because if I give them this, you know, that could set things off. And people were saying, and the person who was delivering the training was saying that ultimately the thing to be aware of is people, whether it's with neurodiversity or with mental health or well-being, they're not telling their employers, like by telling their employer, they're not saying like, I necessarily need you to like see me as any different than what you did before. I'm just letting you know that like, I might do. So like they were saying, for example, neurodiversity, for some people who are neurodiverse, they prefer to actually like come in later because like just the whole commute process, they just prefer to like.
They can get overstimulated.
Yeah. So they were saying they just prefer like that, like a simpler process, like just starting a bit later because they're not dealing with like rush hour and all of that stuff. They were saying for some people, they prefer to actually like they don't like being in the office if there's nothing to do. So they were saying, you know, more workplaces should be more flexible even with that. So if you finish your workload, you don't have to feel like you have to stay, or like, I'm not saying
Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, like obviously you're contracted to work a certain number of hours every day, but they were saying like, oh, maybe you should give the person the option to like, oh, actually, you've done all the stuff you needed to do that meant you had to be in the office. If you wanted to just go home and work from home for the rest of the day, you could do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting. And I guess one final point before we go on to the next question is, I know that like from friends as well, that they were saying that for a lot of, especially with a lot of that stuff that I just mentioned, they were saying it can feel that a lot of organizations are just like, yeah, we care about people's well-being and people's mental health and people taking things easily. But then it's almost like what you said, like with the person you mentioned regarding the university, that you'll then turn around and be like, oh, can I not do X because of Y? Or like, can I not go see, can I actually finish work earlier today because, I'm actually having a really hard time. Or actually, I can't come into the office today because I'm feeling really depressed and stuff like that. And then it's almost just like, oh, okay. Typically we don't allow this for long. Or like you said, like that person having to redo a whole year just because
that's ridiculous.
So I think, I guess at least from an organizational point of view, I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think we do. Let me just check the questions. Yeah, we do have a bit. Question. The last question is kind of linked to this, but I do think definitely like that's one of the things that has to change. Is it has to be that when it comes to sort of like mental health and well-being, that it's not just promises or like we say we're sort of very supportive.
Yeah, it's not just all talk. Do something about it.
100%. Mental health is really important to us at Pick Up the Mic, and we love to share resources that can support your mental health. And that's why we are so glad to have today's sponsor. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service and is 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get you started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live appointments when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't right for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at an affordable price. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/pickupthemic. I've also linked them down below in the description. So again, that's betterhelp.com/pickupthemic, and start your journey today. 100%. But yeah, we're going to go on to the next question, which is all about training and workshops. We've spoken a bit about training, but it would be really interesting to know how does the bespoke training that you offer, the workshops that you offer, the team building activities that you provide, how do they empower organizations and help them to improve their KPIs?
So we offer bespoke training, yes. So for example, if you discover that there's something in your strategy that's missing that we don't particularly have on our service list, we can partner with you to create something that will fill that gap, yes. But then we also have a set list of offerings, for example, inclusion workshops, mental health training. Mental health recognize and respond is like mental health first aid, but for like everyone, not just the leaders. And there's things like that. So the way that the training improves the KPIs is by, if you follow the path that we take, we start from reviewing your existing strategy. Then we've developed a new one that you're going to work towards. And in that new one, there's going to be things that you're going to do to fill the gaps that were in the old one. So the trainings are basically like gap fillers, and they basically help you to implement your strategy. So directly, you're dealing with your employee engagement, you're dealing with turnover, you're dealing with employee well-being, rather than just saying, putting posters up somewhere. You're actually taking tangible steps to make sure that everybody in the workplace is in the know. I can give an example of, so one of the trainings that are like a specialty is the speed dating workshop. So that one is built on a Harvard study, which says that people find pleasure talking about themselves. And then there's a principle called in psychology called classical conditioning, which is basically, I don't know if you know it, but I'll just, for the audience, there was a study that showed that every time you basically rang a bell, it's like, for example, every time you ring a bell, the dog comes to you and you give them food. So every time you ring the bell, the dog starts to salivate because they have associated ringing a bell with food. So the point of the individualism speed dating workshop is that you're talking about yourself, that's stimulating dopamine, pleasure pathways in your brain. But at the same time, you're getting to know someone for who they are and see them as a human being, rather than just a statistic in the office or that person that sits next to you that you treat like trash. Essentially, we're playing on psychological principles that mean that anytime you're speaking to someone and getting to know them for who they are, those same pathways are activated in the brain. So without even being in a speed dating setting, you're going to automatically do it anyway. And what that does is build employee engagement, it builds productivity and things like that. So the training that I do is very evidence-based and it's not just standing, with some slides. It's hands-on, it's based on the science. And I think that's perhaps maybe where my medical background favors me, because I'm able to know what actually works and what doesn't. And then in terms of other training that I've done in the past, the mental health training, for example, that one is just like an interactive discussion session. And that's really good for garnering stigma and getting to know what the main issues are in a particular environment. For example, like last time I learned that the reason why Africans might be more likely to see a traditionalist is because not just because, yes, spiritual things, but also you have to consider the fact that hospitals are crazy expensive. People in Africa are more likely to go by recommendation or word of mouth than, reading up on the books, because books are expensive and things like that. School's expensive. School's always on strike. So when you say, I'm having this issue and someone says to you, okay, let me recommend a traditionalist, you just go. So there's loads of things to that I learn a lot from doing training, and the people that are in the training learn a lot. But in terms of the core performance indicators when it comes to a business that training deals with, it's your turnover, your employee engagement, your productivity, even profitability. Because if you're what's it called? If the employees aren't working, if the employees are constantly clashing, they're wasting hours, they're wasting time, there's a lack of productivity, clients aren't happy with the work that's being produced, things like that. So it's very important to deal with. And I think it's one thing that sets Tolu Wellspring apart from any other consultancy, because other consultancies can find the gaps, and that's great. But can they fill the gaps? No. So that's why that's kind of my model. Yes, I'm going to tell you all the things that's wrong, but never fear, because we can fix it straight away with the service list. So that's, kind of how training and workshops work. I'm interested to know, like, you said you've done neurodiversity training, not to flip the interview around, but what kind of other training, like, how has that been?
That's been really good. So at the different places that I've worked, they have offer like mental health first aid as well. It's mainly just been because obviously, like, for some of those trainings, like they do it in like bulk sessions rather than like, it's like a
rolling thing.
Yeah. So that's why so I haven't done it yet. But the neurodiversity one was really interesting because both from, like, I guess both my job, but also for the stuff that I do with like pick up the mic. It was really good to get that experience, because you then get to see like both sides of things. So what I mean by that is it's really cool because you get to, so with work, there are people that, with not even like necessarily within my team, but there are people within the wider organization that work within sort of the field of I'm about to say sustainability, but they work with you get to work with different people, and some people are neurodiverse. So it was really interesting to see from the people that I support through my job, how I can sort of make things more accommodating to them, how I can ensure that they're getting the most out of their experience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to be that you are, that you want to sort of have those people involved, or you want to support those people, but then actually it turns out that you're not able to because you're saying I don't know, obviously there's certain things you can do, there's certain things you can't, depending on budgets and other stuff. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting to see that, to be able to turn around and say oh, actually, you want to be supported via, I don't know, mental health, you want to be supported by having online sessions so that you can listen back to them in your own time. We can facilitate that. They would I know some people use tools there's Otter AI that does comes up with a transcript, but it also does summary notes as well. So it can do summary notes based on what's been discussed. So some people are saying that they love the fact that stuff is online and is recorded, but they know that they'll never go back and watch it. So they said having these transcripts and summary notes help them to know the key points that they should be aware of. But yeah, I'd say for me, especially with that training, it's good to see how outside of just, I guess, within my actual my part-time job, I don't have someone that I'm managing, but within the within Pick Up the Mic, I do. So it's also interesting to see with that, to be aware of oh, how can I make sure that they're finding things inclusive, they don't feel left out or pressured, or they don't feel concerned of, as we mentioned, expressing that, oh, actually, mental well-being wise, this is where I'm at, or I suffer from this. Because the most important, I mentioned before, is as an organization, we don't Pick Up the Mic. I don't want it to be that if someone says that, I don't know, they can't do early recordings because, well-being wise, they just find it really hard to get up in the morning for whatever reason that could be. I don't want them to feel actually, okay, you're now going to have to miss out on all of this stuff. I want them to sort of see how we can work around it and still get involved.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it actually influences you in your life, because it's one thing to do training, but it's another thing for it to actually stick with you. So yeah, I like that.
Thank you. But yeah, I do think that that's even not just one place that I know across the different places, with friends and stuff. I think the biggest thing that I've seen from them is that they always say, what you said, that with training, it can be very much just in the moment, we'll send this to your senior management, we'll make them aware of all the stuff you've discussed. And then, you turn around and then it's almost a month or two later, and literally, like you said, it's all gone out the window, or it turns around, people turn around and say, actually, we can't do any of the stuff that, you were suggesting because we don't have budget, or we don't have this, or we don't have that. So, it can be a very much just a sort of all for show and not anything actually being done. But I do think that training like that can stick with you, and if done properly, because I think the organization that did it did a really good job. And as you mentioned, routinely as well, it can really stay with you. So
I agree.
We've come to the last question, which I've been hyping up for a while. But this is all about looking at, I guess, things globally. So you mentioned in your bio that you've partnered with international NGOs and you offer free mental health training. So based on that, it would be really interesting. And I know we've kind of alluded to this, but I think it would be really interesting to hear. What are some of the notable differences or similarities you've observed in how different cultures approach mental health and inclusion?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think cultural competency when it comes to mental health is such a huge thing because as I've learned through my work, it's not just about how people perceive mental health, but it's also about how you treat mental health as well, and how you address mental health. Like, for example, the last organization I partnered with, Beautiful Minds Africa, they're an amazing organized NGO. In Africa, they help young girls who are struggling with their mental health. So I was talking to the CEO, and we were planning this session, and I was basically like to her in the it was really small things initially. Like I had a form. So the way that this went, because we're doing a paper on the results from the training, is that there was a pre-training survey, the training, and then a post-training survey, and then effectively what we're doing is comparing the results from before and after to see if they've improved. And they have, but we're just, writing a paper on it because writing papers are fun. No, I'm joking. It's for research. And I realized that there's subtle things in the ways that we do things over here that even though I'm Nigerian, I don't know enough about it. Like a really small example was, like, for example, the time of the session. I put 7:30 p.m. and she goes to me, 7:30 p.m. what? BST, GMT, GMT plus one. And I was like, I don't know, because we're so blindsided to everyone else's experience, if that makes sense. I'm thinking 7:30 p.m. Yeah, that's fine. Or another example is when I was doing the inclusion effect with the former CPO of KFC. He's in Australia, and I kept saying to him, 5 p.m. is fine, 5 p.m. is fine. And he was like, 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is my 8 a.m. And I was like, I was like, what? You're basically the next day. It's things, really subtle things like that, that are good places to start from in terms of understanding other people's experience. And that's it kind of grew from there. So yeah, we started from something as small as time, but then we went on to bigger things like language, for example. Madness. What does madness mean in the English dictionary versus what does madness actually mean in Nigeria, and how is it being used? For example, in the UK, if you see someone that's mentally unwell and you call them mad, that's a really huge thing. And yes, it's huge in Africa as well, but you have to consider the fact that actually the word mad is actually a core part of their day-to-day vocabulary. Like, you can do something, are you mad? Things like that. So there's a lot of things to consider that are really tiny things, but then there's also big things. Like, for example, in Pakistan, schizophrenia, people question whether it exists or not, and there's all these cultural aspects that, having been in the UK for so long, you miss out on them. That's why I like partnering with organizations from the country that I want to target rather than organizations here, because they're from there. Like, I have conversations with the lady all the time, and I learned so much from her. I'm Nigerian myself, but she's a Nigerian. She's worked in neuropsychiatric hospitals in Nigeria. She's founding, she's a chief executive of an NGO in Nigeria. So I'm not going to be the one to tell her about what's going on in Nigeria. It's a case of humility and listening and being able to get a solution. And it is really just like consulting. I'm not a builder. I don't have any engineering qualifications, but if I want to help a construction company, I'm going to have to listen to them to understand how it works in construction before I offer my solutions, because otherwise I'm going to be blindsided. I'm not blindsided, but I'm going to have blind spots. So when it comes to mental health in other cultures, the biggest challenge I think everyone has is understanding how it's perceived, yes, but also how it's treated over there. And dealing with it from that way. But I've seen some organizations do it really well. For example, there's an organization that did some work in Kenya concerning mental health, and essentially what they did is they said, okay, it's going to be really difficult for us to convince Kenyans to stop going to church for mental illness, so let's train the clergymen on mental health first aid. How clever is that? Things like that, understanding people, the way that people do things, not trying to change it, but trying to work around it to create solutions and better results. And that's what strategy is all about. Strategy is not about changing who you are, but it's about doing things in a way that will yield the best results at the lowest, cost to self possible. So yeah, when it comes to mental health in other cultures, there's so many things to consider. There's spiritual factors to consider. There's cultural factors to consider. There's poverty to consider. For example, like in the UK, after you get discharged, there's a section which is unfortunately escaping my mind now, which is so annoying. I think it's 117 or 112. I can't remember. But essentially, it talks about aftercare. So after this person has been treated, what's left for them? Accommodation, social worker, this, that, and the other. Do you think they have that in a remote village in Nigeria? No. Yeah, you could take them to hospital, but what's going to happen afterwards? What's going to stop them from coming back into hospital? There's no section 17 aftercare or what. I can't remember the section, but there's no section in the Mental Health Act for aftercare that's actually working. It's just so much different. Even between European countries, it's different. Like you could take prison, for example. In the UK prison system is very different to the Scandinavian prison system. So if you want to deal with them, you're going to do it in a different way. So it is the biggest challenge is just listening, because as the specialist, you're in possession of the facts. You know everything. So it's very easy to go in there thinking that I know everything about mental health. So what can you tell me that I don't know? But you have to realize that even if you are Black, even if you are a woman, you don't have the exact same experience by virtue of your environment as someone who's in a different environment. So listening to them is really important. So that's like, for example, in the training sessions I did, anytime I said something, I'd ask for input on it from the audience so they can give their perspective so everyone can also hear, but also feel familiar. It's all well and me and good saying that you shouldn't call people with mental health mad, and that trauma causes mental illness, some mental illnesses. But I want to hear in the way that, in their own language, basically, how would you say it? And people gave really interesting stories. I know a lady gave a really nice story about a childhood trauma, and it was like, oh wow, like, it's so much different from me talking at you. From kind of like the lens of like not even living where you're living. I mean, there's protests going on in Africa right now. I'd be silly to say that, oh, I understand what they're going through. No, I don't. I don't. I have food, I have shelter. Like, come on. It's just, yeah, I'd rather speak to them and say, please tell me what you're going through so I can help you, than saying, oh, I totally understand. You just don't. Maybe that's something I learned from medical school, because we learned that you shouldn't tell a patient that you understand, because you don't. You're not in the hospital bed. You just don't understand. You should rather say, I'm sorry to hear that, or try and garner more information. So yeah, those are kind of the challenges. I think that's the main challenge, but then there's also other challenges like spirituality, culture, and also lack of treatment. Like take COVID, for example. They had the vaccine, but they didn't have syringes. So it's all we all know that you need a vaccine, but how are you going to administer the vaccine if there's no syringe? So it's understanding the issue. You could be asking, why aren't Nigerians getting vaccinated, or why aren't people from X country getting vaccinated? But until you speak to them and understand what is actually going on, you won't know what's causing the issue. And I think it's got a lot to do with leadership as well, because the biggest part of being a leader is listening. So if you're trying to lead people to a solution, you don't have to be a CEO. You're leading people towards a solution. So you need to use leadership principles, and listening, I think, is the biggest one.
Definitely agree. I think that nicely leads us on to passing the mic, which we'll see us swapping roles. So Tolu has a question that she'd like to ask me. Tolu, I'm going to hand over to you. Please, could you let me know the question?
So, Jeffrey, my question for you is, who is responsible for culture in student environments?
So it's a good question. I think it could be a few people. I think it's definitely, I guess the obvious one would be the university or the student union itself that is there, in the sense of they establish what sort of the university is like okay with and also not okay with, as well as like the culture of the actual like campus itself. Because while I do agree that like I guess it's arguably the same as society, that while you can argue that like individuals have their own choices and they decide like what is good, seen throughout history, people have an influence on like what they do. So, so as a group, if you decide like X is okay, or if you're told by the people that sort of like are in positions of power that this is okay and this isn't okay, then most people will just go along with that, in the sense of like, to equate it to university, you're told you're not allowed to plagiarize and just copy and paste links from Wikipedia or articles from Wikipedia and submit that as your coursework. You know, you don't do it because you know there are consequences if you do it. So that's why I say student unions in universities are definitely a starting point. But I think especially like later on, not even so far to say like it's the union president or the union like the union, like students who are elected in student union positions, because I know that there were people at my university that like didn't care about our student union and were just like, I'm just here for my degree and I'm out. So I think it's also comes to like the individuals themselves and sort of like the role that they set both for their fellow classmates, but also to like other students. So once you're sort of like a second year or even a final year student, if you're a placement student, like you set the example for that. I know, like, for example, like when I was at uni, I was very much aware that like when I did a summer placement at the Environment Agency, I was very much aware that like the example that I set here is going to set the example for the next student that's going to come. So if I'm sort of taking the mick, if I'm not really being professional, if I'm like being rude or whatever, then the Environment Agency will just say, actually, sorry, we're going to take this space away from you because we had a horrible time with X and we feel like this person would not be good. So I feel like that's very much the same with, it's the same with university, that you're almost setting the example for like the next person after you. It's funny because technically, like when I was doing my undergraduate, that was literally the case because we were the first year at Brunel to do environmental science. So no one else had done it. The lecturers had never taught that course before. So even from the get-go, like as a first year student, I was very much aware, like, okay, so the feedback that we give here is going to be what's taken on for the next academic year that was coming around quick. So whether that was like how the course was marketed, how people were like finding the course as a whole, like all of this stuff, I was like, it's very much that. And then, I'd say the final, I guess, example would be like maybe the alumni. Because I know like for certain universities, alumni are a bit more heavily involved with stuff than others. So I think it's also your alumni. So it's also show that like the wide variety of like what's like not only the student experience, but also as you mentioned, like the different positions. So whether it's from like your like economic status, whether it's your like not only just showing like, oh yeah, you know, our university we've had like Black students, we've had white students, we've had Asian students, like showing it that, oh, actually, you know, we had one student, they studied, I don't know, like, I guess like you were saying here, like people might study biomed, and then they might go into specialize into like psychology, or showing that like, actually, you know, people might study, you know, physics, and they've actually become a film director and they do consulting on the physics of like the science part of science fiction films. So showing that there's that wide variety of for students, because for a lot of students, they feel as though like my degree is my life. So I can't expand out of doing a career outside of that. But when you do show them that actually that's not the case, that can be really good. Those would be my three examples.
I think those are good examples. I agree with you. I think, alumni, like even a policy, like things like that, like if you do this, this is going to happen. It's really, and making sure that you actually follow through with it. I kind of see it, it's kind of like parenting, I guess, you know, like you make a promise to the child, you know, don't do that, but you have to make sure you follow through on the consequence. Otherwise, they're not going to take you seriously. And you're not going to create
100%.
any tangible change. So yeah, I really like that.
No, 100%. Yeah. Any other questions?
I guess what's next for Pick Up the Mic? I mean, I really enjoyed being a guest, actually.
Oh,
Been
thank
nice.
you. Yeah, what's next? I guess working with, I say it most of like when people ask this all the time, I always end up saying it, working with more organizations.
Yeah.
But that's just mainly because we enjoy it. We like doing that. We're definitely looking, so we've recently this year started to do, so in addition to like our photography, videography and interview services, we've also started to do like mentoring and workshops with people. So definitely want to do more of those. So building up, so whether people want to know more about like podcasting, they want to know about other things that are relevant to whether you are a young person or not. So like networking, like whether they want to know about like content creation, anything like that. Like I think it'd be really good to do more workshops like that. And to sort of maybe build it up. Long term, like biggest dream would be to run a program that supports young people, whether that's like young creatives, whether that's uni students, like to run a program of some sort to support people would be really good. If anyone's interested, hit us up. And then, finally, I would say there's like a surprise that we're sort of trying to do in line with our March next year, because March is basically the anniversary of Pick Up the Mic. So that one I'm keeping on the down low for the moment until everything gets confirmed. But once that does get confirmed, I will be shouting it from the rooftop. So keep an eye out.
Cool.
But yeah, there should be something cool happening in March next year.
Cool. I'm excited.
Perfect. Cool.
But yeah, I don't have any more questions. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Really relaxed,
But yeah, we're now going to go on to MCs of the month, which are organizations or individuals that do incredible work, and we want to spotlight them today. Today's episode, we're talking about well-being and mental health. We could pick a lot, but particularly, I guess, focusing it on our audience, which mainly seem to be young people or uni students. We think it'd be really great to touch on Young Minds. So Young Minds are an organization. We'll also include the link to their website down below. But they are a charity that supports young people with mental health. They have a lot of resources and campaigns that can provide like text and like support regarding the overall situation. So whether you are someone who works with young people, they have resources for that. They also do training if you're interested. But yeah, whether you're a school, teacher, lecturer, they have support resources to support young people. If you are a young person or a parent and you're looking to support, you're looking for a bit more support on mental health and how that works and like what you can do for that, they also have stuff on their website about that. So you can sort of like learn more about sort of different conditions, medications, coping with life from the parent perspective. They've got like a parent's guide on mental health, getting support from mental health services. How do you talk to your child about mental health, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they have a lot of cool like resources that can help expand that like a wider conversation. So if you are sort of looking to build that up, you want to know a bit more about like what is available, definitely check them out. And they also, so they have on their website, so they have, I believe, a youth panel. So if you were interested in being a part of their youth panel, you're more than welcome to maybe get in touch with them and see where things go. But yeah, they do a lot of cool work. So yeah, we definitely would recommend them. So yeah, check them out. But yeah, we're now gonna go to everyone's favorite part, the takeaway section, which is unfortunately not where we're bringing food your way, but instead we discuss like an overview of the episode and give you a message to go home with. So Tolu's spoken about a lot of things. It's been a really great speaking to you, but if you had to summarize the whole conversation into like a word, a sentence, if you had to summarize everything, what would be the thing you would like our audience to go home with?
I think Wow, I should have had maybe a prep session before this. I think the word or thing that I want everyone to go home with is listen. It's been such a prominent theme in everything we've discussed, from inclusion to well-being to even using the model. Listen. If someone's talking to you, listen. If someone's showing signs of distress, listen. If you want to understand what's going on with someone, listen. Like, the world will just be a better place if everybody just listened. But we don't do enough listen. We do a lot of hearing and preparing what we want to say next and things like that, but we don't do enough listening. So 100%. I think that's my thing that I want everyone to take away from this.
Perfect. No, thank you. I definitely agree. And just to add to that, there was this, I don't remember where I saw it, but someone was talking about that, as you mentioned, that we're very much, it was in this book that I definitely recommend, called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin.
Okay.
And it's basically just talking as a whole about, like, as creatives, how you can, like, get ideas and sort of, like, figure out stuff. But he basically was talking about in his book that people are very much, he said people basically, like, go through life with headphones. So they're very much just, like, in their own worlds. They don't necessarily want to engage with, or sort of like you said, they're listening, but they're listening to respond. They're listening to, like, argue. They're listening to, like, shut something down or to, like, hype something up. But he said people are rarely just, like, listening for the like definition of the word, if you're just hearing what's coming your way. And he was saying that just, like, be aware of that. Like, if you are going, like, I guess, like you said, you know, if you're listening to someone speak or you're in a conversation with someone, you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm listening, like, you're listening part way and then you're thinking, oh, actually this person said this, so I'm going to remember this so I can challenge it or agree with it later on. You're actually listening so you can engage with them later on. But yeah, I think that's really great advice, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. But yeah, we come to the end of today's episode. It's been great speaking to you, Tolu. As I mentioned before, this is the part where you can plug any upcoming stuff you've got. How can people find out more about you, about Tolu Wellspring? How can people get involved? Where should they be looking? Any social media handles? This is your time to plug everything.
I guess you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Tolu Afelumo, so Afelumo. You can follow us on TikTok, Tolu Wellspring. You can also follow my private TikTok if you want, Tolu Talk. The O is a 0. But yeah, that's kind of it for me. I'm not really, don't have Twitter or anything like that. So that's kind of it for me. You can also visit our website, www.toluwellspring.co.uk, and have a look. I think we should be doing a personal statement and branding workshop before the end of this year together. So look out for that if you're in sixth form or year 11. So yeah, that's kind of it. In terms of anything else I'm doing, it's all organisational, so I don't know. Don't know if I can mention it.
No, that's all right. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So yeah, keep an eye on the space, everyone. New things coming soon. But yeah, thank you very much to you, our wonderful audience, coming back for another episode of the Student Guide. If you liked this episode or you wanted to support it, like, comment, subscribe is always appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any other episodes of the Student Guide or any of the other episodes that come out on the Pick Up the Mic YouTube channel, then please make sure that you are subscribed, that you click the notification bell at the bottom of the video. If you would like to support the podcast, you can do that through 2 ways. You can either become a YouTube channel member or you can join our Patreon page. The links to both are in the description. If you're interested in also receiving some perks as well, as I mentioned, we've now got merch, so we're now selling some merch. So if you do want to sign up to receive some merch, please check out our Linktree page. The link is there. Bear in mind that if you are a Patreon member, you do get, and paying Patreon member, I might add, you do get a bit of a discount on those prices. So please do think about subscribing to the Patreon page. It's just the price of a coffee. And then yeah, finally, if you want to know about the other channels, so as you may know, we have split some of our content across different YouTube channels. So check out the Two Maesters if you want to know more about sci-fi and fantasy. For gaming, check out Pick Up the Controller, and for all things anime related, check out Senses of Anime. But yeah, you can find all of those on our main, if you go to our main YouTube page, the links and they've all got their pop-ups all there. But yeah, we've come to the end. Thank you again, Tolu. It's been great speaking to you. I do believe this is episode either 8 or 9, so we're very much coming to the end of season 6 of the Student Guide. But don't worry, we're not planning on stopping it yet. There will be some announcements ahead of season 7, so keep an eye on that. But yeah, we're going to close today's chapter of the Student Guide. We will see you all soon. But yeah, wishing you all the best. Take care and speak to you soon.